You say, yeah, leadership. Leadership. One more time, leadership. What I'd like to quickly do before we jump in, I would like 5 words that describe your learning from this morning so far, okay? 5 words, and we're just going to ask for 5 volunteers to give me a one-word phrase or one word that describes your learning. Let's just do 5 of them. Popcorn it out. Motivating. Excited. Positive. Hopeful. Challenging. And with that challenging comes the need for constant continuous improvement. So I want to thank you all for being here at this year's 2019 PBIS Leadership Conference on behalf of the Wisconsin RTI Center and our school teams that are with us today presenting, as well as all of you in the room. We are so glad that we can be here collectively as educators and leaders in the field of education. So thank you for your time and your support and for filling this room with your hearts and your brains and your willingness to continue that journey of implementation. You are at the session of shifting the work of the PBIS team to improve implementation and sustainability. We are live at our CISAs that are hosting, so welcome to our CISAs. We're thrilled that you are joining us as well this afternoon after lunch. And we hope that you're going to get as much out of this session off-site as what everybody is going to get on-site in this room. What I would like to introduce to you is where you are going to get one of your resources for today. We need you to access this bit.ly. So I'm going to give you a minute to go ahead and access that bit.ly that's on the screen. Give you a little bit of wait time here to get that done. We're going to be reviewing this document in about 6 slides, so don't start using it yet. We're going to start right in with it at about 6 slides from now. Does anybody need more time out there? Hands up, yep, perfect. It is case sensitive, just letting you know. Try it again, see if we get that same error message. We got one error message. Hopefully it's just a typo. Are some of you on? Can I get head nods? Yes? Lots of head nods. I got a thumbs up in the back of the room. That's awesome. Anybody need more time? Okay. How about now? We doing good? Thumbs up from everybody. Let's go. See thumbs up. Just going to kind of take a read. We're doing good, Liz. So my name is Sarah Nelson. I'm a North Regional Technical Assistance Coordinator for the Wisconsin RTI Center. I actually live about 20 minutes east of Superior, way up north. My nickname is Canada here with the center, and I also have my teammate.
I'm Liz Ponto. I work in the exact opposite region as Sarah. I'm in the south. I am a Regional Technical Assistance Coordinator, and I am in Madison.
And we are so thrilled that we have a couple school teams joining us today. Do you want to introduce them now, or would you like to introduce them as we get going and they can introduce themselves? It's totally up to you. A second one? Okay, perfect. We are going to start today really diving into where are we focusing. And we are going to be focusing on our purpose and vision of the team. And I want you to notice what's in the heart of this graphic, this equitable multi-level system of support graphic. In the heart of this graphic, we find equity. And we have a state definition for equity. Equity means that every student has access to the educational resources and rigor they need at the right moment in their education, across race, gender, ethnicity, language, disability, sexual orientation, family background, and/or family income. We are constantly working on continuous improvement to change the outcomes that historically we have seen for our underserved populations of students. It pounds our heart. It's what helps our heart keep beating, knowing that we are still underserving populations of students that we serve every day in our schools. So as we work on creating strong leadership teams, implementing PBIS and academics in our schools, we need to remember that equity is at the heart of all that we do in all of our continuous improvement efforts. We're going to start today by really focusing on strong shared leadership. You're going to hear from some schools, their connections to implementation and their role of the team and how strong shared leadership has been a role in that implementation. We define strong shared leadership as representative teams with responsibility to lead and oversee implementation of an equitable multi-level system of support at the school and at the district level. Whether you're here with a school lens or a district lens, we hope that you're going to be able to take pieces of learning back from our teams that are sharing today from their journey to help you continue the implementation of your own, knowing that not at any school or any district is identical, and that there's different needs within those schools and districts, but we learn from each other, and that networking and learning from each other is how we continue on our journey. Want to go ahead, Liz? We have one slide that we'd like you to just focus on as we think about what we mean by systemic implementation and the role of the team in supporting systemic implementation through strong shared leadership. The slide that's on the screen right now helps us think about how we move change from the district all the way down through the classroom level. Where your role as a leader in implementing PBIS or academic RTI may be on this screen, where you fit in, where you support implementation from the district vision, school vision, in a grade level or a course area team, down to the classroom, ultimately really changing the outcomes for each and every student. We think about district vision, we think about district non-negotiables, and we think about district action plans and continuous improvement efforts, how that impacts what we do in our schools within a district, how that looks within our course levels and our grade level teams, and what that looks like in each and every one of our classrooms. When we define strong shared leadership and systemic implementation, and we really know what those key features are, we can better work together in changing those student outcomes. Just a reminder for you, as you're on your journey, when we talk about the shared style of leadership, we know that it's collaborative. We know that it starts with building really strong relationships within our teams, within our PBIS leadership team, at the school and the district level. We focus on shared vision, values, beliefs, and commitments, and how our practices really are impacted by what we believe around serving all kids in our schools and our districts. Strong shared leadership and a shared style of leadership asks instead of tells. They support, they coach. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about team trained support and what that means. And we start to understand as a team what we mean by the systems change process and moving change through a district through stages of implementation. And I think we're going to hear a little bit about that from our schools that are going to be sharing up next.
Okay, so the team trained support, and this is a slightly different slide than you saw this morning from our director, Kathy Ryder. She had questions by her slide. We have placed statements here, but it is the same idea. The team, the train, and the support piece. So we have done a lot of work thinking about the role of the team and looking at where teams have been and what they've worked on and what's worked and what hasn't and what leads to sustainability. And one of the things that was very clear is teams were busy doing a lot of things, and there was turnover in districts and in buildings, and there was a lot of start over. And what we realized is we didn't focus enough on the role of the team to really build capacity of staff. So this becomes part of what everyone does. It's just what we do. So if one person leaves, it doesn't disrupt everything and we're starting over and we're at a loss. We're able to keep moving forward because they're supporting this way of work. So, with that in mind, we have created the document I'm going to have you look at in one moment to really think about what are those key pieces for the role of the team. And this will look different from what you've seen before because it's very focused on building capacity and making sure conditions are right for implementation. We have, you see it says draft. We are just in the stages of finalizing the draft. We have had a lot of people look at it and give us feedback. We've had district people look at it, school staff look at it, provide feedback. We've gone through multiple iterations of it. So I do want you to know that. So there is a team piece, and you're going to see that in the document. Because we're really focused on building capacity of people in schools, there's also a section around training. So obviously providing really high quality professional learning, then being very intentional about support. Because what we know is a professional learning experience isn't going to mean we're able to go out and do that thing in practice to fidelity all the time. That just doesn't happen, right? So we need to be very intentional about professional learning and ongoing support. So we made this slide before we realized we weren't allowed to print anything. So you all have access to this document electronically. It might be very hard to put a star, but that document Sarah had you access, we're going to give you a little bit of time to look at that document. It's a 3-page document. There's a section for team, train, and support, so all within the role of the school team. And I realize the star might be challenging, but maybe take note. You could write them down, highlight, bold, hold them in your head if you're really good at that. Note 3, maybe 4 items that really stand out to you or have some particular meaning to you. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. We're going to give you a little bit of time for that. And then I'll talk about the second piece when we come back. So just take a couple minutes. Maybe we'll start with 3, and we'll check back in to review that document. Okay. Some of you are finishing up. You can do that. I will introduce our first speaker. And also today whoa, Sarah, you got ahead of me. Can you go back a slide? Thank you. I didn't even realize you had the clicker. All right, perfect. So as two presenters, we do have two presenters here. Our first presenter, Stephanie Polzar, is from the Mequon-Thiensville School District. She is going to present from a district lens. And then after that, Abigail Thomas, stand up there. She is from Wanakee, from Arboretum Elementary, and she is going to present from a school lens. So you get to see a little bit of both. But what we are offering as something to do might be to take note of some of the examples or practices that they've used as they're starting to rethink the role of their team as it aligns with some of those ideas in the document. So, Stephanie?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Wake up my notes here. All right, like Liz introduced me, my name is Stephanie Polzar. I'm from the Mequon-Thiensville School District. I am going to talk a little bit about how I, as our MLSS coordinator in the district, worked with our district leadership team through some of the team trained support model based on our self-assessment data and how that led us to some actionable practices for our building leaders to take back and implement in their buildings. So I did just want to format an essential question for the 20 or so minutes I have with you today. I'm going to focus on how we use the work of that leadership team to strengthen our implementation, focusing on our universal instructional practices to really focus on allowing our buildings and teams to have a common structure and really sustain their implementation. I'll talk a little bit about how we got to this space, but this is what I'm hoping to tackle with you today. I did just want to put these up here. I see that we had some folks from the center come up and put posters around the room of some of the norms that they use. These are the norms we use in our district. They are from Learning Forward by way of AVID. We are an AVID implementing district. I use these for all of the teams I facilitate. They're always on our agenda, and I always ask teammates or anybody coming to a professional learning that I am facilitating to review them and kind of hold on to one for their learning today. What's going to be most important to you? So they're the vowel norms, right? The A-E-I-O-U norms. So I put them up there for your review. And I would just ask that you kind of pick one to hold in the front of your learning. I always pick integrate new information. I always like to know how am I going to take back what I learn and put it into practice. So a little about me. I'm about to go into my 8th year as a school psychologist. That's my training. But this will be my 2nd year as the multi-level systems of support specialist, which is quite a title, in Mequon. I've been in Mequon since the 15-16 school year. And last year we had Robin Jackson come. I don't know if any of you know her. She's a common speaker on educational leadership. And she worked with some of our district administrators through developing what are our core values in our different systems. And I took that back to my leadership team, and we developed what are our MLSS core values, and I have them up there for you. And a quote that has always stuck out to me from Robin Jackson is what I have on the bottom, that we want to be stubborn on the vision and give autonomy on the details. We are a district of 6 schools who love to have autonomy on the details. They really want to implement things to their own climate and their own culture, which can be a challenge when you're trying to put systems in place. So I often come back to this quote to remind myself, as long as we are being stubborn on the vision, how they implement the details is really up to them. So I like to ground myself in that quote regularly. So like Liz introduced, I'm going to talk about the district leadership team, how our district vision and non-negotiables really have influenced the work that we've done, and how that's led to our own action plan and action items. Little about our district. You can see I put our most recent school report card up there. We're a suburban district just north of Milwaukee. We are a K-4-12. You can see our students and staff up there. We have 1 high school, 2 middles, and 3 elementaries. A unique thing about our district as it is boundaried right now is one of our elementary schools is actually the 2nd biggest school in the district after our high school. So that poses some unique challenges in terms of systems as well. When we have 1 elementary school just over 300 and 1 that's just over 600 students, that causes some unique opportunities for us to work through. You can see I put our student demographics up there also, as well as some of our academic scoring down there. I put that there to really center you on that our district has always been very academically focused. We have a very academically rigorous curriculum, K-4-12, and that's really where the focus has been lying the past couple years. It's just been, I'd say, in the past 3 years or so that we've really put a focus on PBIS and social emotional learning. And so that kind of grounds us for the work that we've been doing. This is our, I'm gonna go back for a second. It doesn't really look green up there, but anything that's underlined like that is a hyperlink. So if you have electronic access to the PowerPoint, you'll see throughout I have a couple of resources in there hyperlinked for you, so I wanted to draw your attention to that. Our mission and vision, I won't read them to you, but you can see they're up there, and I really wanna focus on the equity non-negotiables for our district. We are a district that works through the Integrated Comprehensive Systems framework and receives some coaching around that. That really is a framework that asks schools to really, really put equity at the center, similar to the circle that we saw earlier from Liz. It really asks us to look at our systems and find all of the spaces for marginalization for our students and really address them head on. And a part of that was having some equity non-negotiables. Our district has 10. I put 3 of them up there for you. I pulled these 3 because they're the ones that I think really focus us on our work of social emotional learning and PBIS, and they really helped guide our team through our work as well. A little bit more grounding information is our instructional framework. So I touched on that. We are a very academically rigorous district. We are an AVID district, K-12, which really sets our instructional practices. In addition, our high school is Kagan trained. Those are hyperlinked if you're not sure what AVID or Kagan are for you to explore. But they really set the collaborative practices that exist in our classroom, as well as the instructional framework that our teachers follow. And you can see that included in our instructional framework is a positive learner-focused culture, which was really the entry point that I was able to use in terms of talking to teachers about why social emotional learning and PBIS in their classrooms was important. So our PBIS journey, a couple of things that are important for us to ground on. First is who are the staff that we have to do this work. So 2 years ago, we made a staffing shift, and we went from having 1 counselor for all of the elementary schools and social workers that were split between buildings to a full-time social emotional coach in each building. This is the person who is grounded at the work of the building level. They are also the people that make up my leaders on my district implementation team. Historically, all 6 of my buildings are at least Tier 1 trained. However, they have been independent contractors in how they are doing PBIS. So that some have gone to CISA, some have had folks come into their buildings, all implementing PBIS, but in their own special flavor and their own special way. Our district leadership team really began regular meetings in the 17-18 school year, and that's really when we started talking about what this work would look like. So what did our work look like this year? Really started in September. We made a conscious decision that while social emotional learning was becoming important to our district, we couldn't make it one more thing. We needed to talk about social emotional learning in terms of our existing PBIS framework. We moved to some common self-assessments. We had been doing a hodgepodge of some on the BOQ and some on the TFI and some on the SET and some not doing anything. This year we all moved to the TFI and the SAS, which really had a significant impact on the way we were able to look at data from a district-wide level and set some greatest areas of need. And we started in the fall by identifying our common practices. I've hyperlinked in the activity we use. It's a Macintosh activity, the Aligning and Integrating Initiatives. It was really meaningful for our staff, our leaders, to engage in that and see, while there certainly were commonalities, we were doing things very differently. And I don't think we as a team recognized that until we really sat down and said, what are all the practices we're engaging in terms of teaching, looking at data, and collaborating? So that activity was very meaningful and was the basis of the work that we did moving forward. In December, by the time everybody had taken the TFI, we were able to look at our district-wide data through self-assessment. So while our buildings had been action planning, this was really the first time that as a district team we were able to look at that data. We used a Notice Wonder protocol, which helped us look at our data in a really clear and concrete way without bringing in a lot of emotions into it, and identify what was our greatest area of need across buildings. And then we worked with our TAC thank you to Emily, to determine what really should be our next steps in action planning. And those next steps, this was our greatest area of need. So if you know the TFI, it was line item 7. It's really around providing professional development to our staff in a common way. But as kind of introduced before, Emily brought us to the team train support model, which really helped our team recognize that while train was really the area that we had identified as our greatest area of need, our practice alignment activity had shown us that we had to back up to team. We weren't talking the same language, we weren't talking about the same structures, and we weren't talking about them in the same way. So while our GAN was providing that professional development, we had to go about 4 steps back to align ourselves before we could talk about what does professional development really look like. So the work around that really led us to Practice Profiles, which is a tool out of the National Implementation Research Network. Those are hyperlinked in there for you if you're curious about what that looks like, and I'll show you an example of ours in just a minute. But practice profiles are really intended to help make a practice teachable, learnable, and doable. It really helped our team define what are the practices we're talking about and what do they mean to us in common language in a common way. Again, our aim was really that integrated system. So we really took into account all of those different initiatives that were coming at our staff and our teachers. I'm gonna pop ahead in just a minute. We really considered a lot of things. We had just gone through all of that trauma-informed training that I'm sure many of you who are from Wisconsin have also taken part in. We considered all of the SEL practices we were already engaging in our buildings. We talked about our culturally responsive and restorative practices, which is also important to our schools, as well as our academic enablers and our focus on equity. We were taking into account all of these initiatives when talking about our practices so that when we were going back to our buildings and going back to our teachers, we were framing them as one thing and not 17 different things, which sometimes is what it can feel like. So the practice profiles really asked us to define what must be in place in our systems. In order for us to be confident in saying we are at full implementation in our universal systems, what must we see? It was really those big buckets of learning, the vision, going back to my Robin Jackson quote, it helps define the vision that then allows the buildings to go back and implement it in their own way that's unique to their own climate and culture. So again, down to the bottom, when we talk about the team train support model in our district, is that we can't train what we can't define. And the practice profile is really the tool that we use to define what our practices were. So our work then led us to some prioritizing. So we intended to develop practice profiles around those features of universal implementation. So you can see on the left that language is probably familiar to you as kind of the 4 areas of PBIS instruction at the universal level: teaching expectations, correcting errors, requesting assistance, and acknowledgement. Recognizing that we wanted to integrate our social emotional system, we changed our vocabulary a little bit. So our practice profiles are around the blue text. That's what we're calling them. We also recognized that we were not going to be able to write 4 in-depth, well-thought-out practice profiles in a year. So we prioritized teaching school-wide expectations as the one that we were going to focus on most. We thought it was the one that was going to have the greatest impact in our buildings to start with, and the one that we had the most buy-in for. We have started talking about next year. Discipline is a big discussion in our district right now. We just had some new board policy come out about it. So I suspect that behavior response is going to be the one we work on coming up. So this is an example of what our practice profile looked like. I wanted to give you some visual to put towards it. So you can see I talk about the outcomes on the top. Why are we doing PBIS as a framework? I tied it back to our district non-negotiables. That's something I try to do with all of the resources that come out of our team, is how does this tie back to our district non-negotiables and our district strategic plan? Key features are defined on the left side of the form. I put in school-wide matrix because it's the most concrete example of a key feature. And then what the practice profile really asks you to do is talk about why is this a key feature, how does this contribute to the outcome, and then define what does this look like in ideal state? What does it mean to say we are doing this proficiently? What is acceptable variation, right? Again, going back to building climate and culture, what are we okay with seeing different across buildings? And then what is unacceptable variation? What are the practices that we are not going to be okay seeing and that we want to start moving away from as soon as possible? So our key features, I gave you an example of school-wide matrix, but I wanted to show you what all of our work groups came up with in terms of the key features for the practice profile. So you can see we broke up into work groups, K-5 and 6-8. I do have a high school slide coming up for you high school folks. But that really helped us individualize the practice profiles by level. And these are the key features, again, based on our practice alignment activity, and then asking ourselves, are there things we can stop doing? And then what are the things we need to add to our key features? Good. I did want to show you, just in case it's also your entry point, because it was certainly mine, our last line item on all practice profiles is designing high quality academic instruction. Like I said, in our district, we're very academically focused, and it's very hard to break into the classroom when you're not speaking an academic language. So one of the things that I did around the practice profile was I worked really closely with our AVID district director, who is probably similar to your curriculum and instruction director, around how are we going to take our instructional practices for SEL and behavior and integrate it into our academic instruction? How are we going to make sure we're speaking that same language to teachers so that they don't just kind of block us out when we start talking about something that's non-academic? So we used Castle's 3 signature practices. Can I, show of hands, anybody familiar with Castle's 3 signature practices? Okay, a smattering. That is hyperlinked in there for you. But what we found when we sat down and looked at them is that Castle's practices align directly with our instructional framework. They are really AVID practices. And so by talking to teachers and talking to our staff about the things that they were already doing in the classroom and how we could look at them from a behavior standpoint rather than just a purely academic standpoint was a really great entry point for us in engaging in this work. So the high school, I promised I would do a high school. High school was a little different. So we did not write the practice profile in the same way as we did for K-8. So my high school had already identified school belonging as an important area for them to focus on. We are a district that does school perceptions on an annual basis. They had looked at their school perceptions data and saw that school belonging was not where they wanted it to be. So they had already identified that. What they didn't know is that school belonging is also a high school PBIS feature. And so, again, that was a really nice entry point for me. I don't know if any of you are high school people, but PBIS is kind of a dirty word at our high school. It envisions pushing a prize cart around the hallways and giving them little trinkets. So really being able to talk to them about school belonging instead of PBIS was really helpful. We then looked at all the good high school PBIS researchers. We pulled from AVID, we pulled from Kagan. We were able to develop a menu of teacher practices in order that teachers could engage in order to develop school belonging in their students. That is then going to be a PPG for all staff next year at the high school. So staff will be able to pick at least one of the practices on the menu and engage their students at the end of each trimester in just a simple survey question to see if they had shown growth in implementing that practice in their classrooms. So that was a really helpful entry point for that. I do have linked over there the high school monograph. If you are a high school person and haven't seen the monograph yet, I really recommend it. It was a really helpful tool for me in entering a world that isn't my comfort zone. I'm an elementary person, so going into the high school was a little out of my comfort zone. So our work and feedback of communication, this was kind of the timeline from the end of last year. Moving forward, actually just yesterday, I presented this work to all of our district BLTs, and they engaged in some work time in prioritizing and action planning, so that was a really cool day to see. But you can see moving forward, we are writing our new school growth plans coming up this year, and the practice profiles are really going to be a helpful tool for us because now we have action steps already written out. We know what we need to do to get to our goal. It's just aligning them now at the building level to see what that implementation looks like. I'm running a little long on time, so I'm going to just show you this and shamelessly plug my colleague who is presenting tomorrow in the check-in, check-out session. We did take a detour into Tier 2 and also developed a practice profile for check-in, check-out. So if that's something you're curious about, you can attend the check-in, check-out session tomorrow and listen to it. So our next steps, we have a lot of work left to do. We had a really good start at the district level, but as I said, we had 3 more practice profiles that we need to write, 3 more systems that we need to define before our buildings can really be asked to engage deeply in them. We need to move on to the train part of the team train support model. Now that we're speaking the same language, we need to talk about how are we going to provide that professional development to our staff. And we're also making some teaming shifts moving into next year, which will impact that work. And then just kind of our questions still to be answered in terms of what does that PD plan look like when we don't have dedicated professional development time. That's going to be a barrier for us to overcome. We're working on a communication and feedback loop to ensure that our buildings have a little bit more voice than they've historically had. And next steps for the high school level is always a question for us. So back to our essential question, we really used that practice profile as an outcome from our team train support work to help us identify those universal practices that our buildings can take then and implement within their own climate and culture. And that's it for me at a district level. I know we're going to have time, I think, at the end for questions, but I do have a little survey there if you have any feedback for me. But Abby is up next.
Well, let's scoot ahead. I am here to kind of give you, well, let me just go to the next slide here, get myself started. My name is Abigail Thomas, and I come to you from the Waunakee Community School District. I have 2 primary roles in our district, the first of which I am a general music teacher, so you probably can tell from my enthusiasm about things. And the second is that I am the internal coach for my main school, which is Arboretum Elementary. Just to direct your attention to the bottom of my first slide, if you would like to contact me with any questions or like to visit my school's PBIS website, you are more than welcome to do so. So my experience with PBIS has been quite a journey over my career in education. The first stop in my journey started with my very first teaching job 13 years ago in a school in Illinois. And typical of that first back-to-school routine, we had our staff training days, and they included PBIS. And I walked into the training, a complete newbie, and I learned about PBIS. I was trained. I felt very good about what I was doing. And at the end of the training, I came out with my stack of shiny new PBIS materials, and I, of course, had my laminated matrix, which I was really proud of. But then there I was at the end of my training. I had my shiny stack of stuff, but I didn't have continued support in my classroom. It was a feeling of being very alone in what I was doing, and it was very hard for me in that first year being in that situation. So take a fast forward here to a different role, a different place. I'm now in Wisconsin. I'm at Arboretum. I'm also the internal coach, starting my 3rd year. And with that shift in role, there's become a kind of a shift in thinking about the way I see PBIS and how I'm trying to drive my team to see PBIS. We've worked really hard on trying to establish the vision of our team being a supportive resource and that both guides our teachers and our students to develop essential skills that will create extended learning and positive interactions with one another. And to do this, we've had to use the team train support model. It's been our source of inspiration, both positive, the things we've done well, and of course, kind of the common pitfalls that we've fallen into. We are certainly on the journey. We're not exactly where we want to be right now. We still are doing a lot of the doing that our presenters were talking about. We output an SCL, a standalone lesson at the end of each month. We are the assembly committee. We're doing all of it. But we're trying to shift that role in thinking about our team and about how our team's role is going to be in the future of our school. So these are kind of the guiding pillars that we've taken from the team train support model that is helping to drive the work that we're doing right now. The first of which is that we honor the idea that we need to rethink the role of our team. We want to be a sustainable team. We want to be able to keep our practices something that we can do no matter who comes in and comes out. We also understand that to make effective changes, we really have to support our staff. We can't just stop at training them, but going that next step of helping them feel like they're not that first-year teacher I was in my classroom with my shiny stack of materials. And then finally, for successful implementation and sustainability, there are certain best practices that leadership teams can use to be able to keep that sustainability, including using that teen train support model. So just a couple demographics. The village of Waunakee is located 12 miles north of the capital. We're on the opposite side of the lake to the north. And the city has its roots in Farmtown, but we're quickly becoming a Madison suburb, where many of our professionals in the community are working directly in Madison or the surrounding communities. The school district itself services kindergarten through 12th grade, and we also have a 4K partnership with the surrounding daycares. We currently, as of 2017, had 4,252 students in our school, and that has in our district, and that has grown significantly each year that I've been in the district. We are split over 5 physical schools. We have 3 elementary schools, including mine. We funnel into 1 intermediate school, 1 middle school, and then into our high school. Finally, Arboretum is starting its 4th year of PBIS. So in terms of some of the other schools in our district, we're a relatively kind of a new school at what we're doing. We do have 450 students. We service those into 4 sections at each grade level. We are a predominantly white school. We do have about 7% of our students with disabilities. We have a low economic disadvantage population. But what that means for us is we do have a lot of parent involvement, and I think that probably is one of the things that has helped us a lot. So if you ever hear me talk about PBIS at my school, I'm going to tell you that the strongest thing that helps our work is my team. It's the makeup of my team and the people who are on it. I actually was not involved in the selection process of our team. I came in after the team was made. My principal, although, did a very good job of picking people from across a variety of places in our school. We currently have 15 members. Some of those are new each year that we've been on our team, but we've managed to retain most of our members as we've gone through this process over the last 4 years. And if you look at the yellow box, you're going to see that our roles and responsibilities are really varied. We are extremely lucky to have our administrative representation. We have district representation that comes to our meetings. We also have specialist representation. I get to play a double role as being a music teacher and the internal coach. And then we also have a grade level rep from every single grade level. And that allows us to have those eyes and ears and mouth to be able to communicate to staff very effectively and efficiently without having to always send emails out about everything. So I'm sure you've all heard of that idea, or not, I shouldn't say idea, but a person say, oh, I have to go to my after-school meeting. And there's always kind of a grunt that happens with that. And I have to admit, when I first started as the internal coach, I was that after-school meeting. I stood at the front of the room, and I facilitated, and we went through our checklist of items, and we did everything all together at the same time, and that was just how it was done. But soon we were really bogged down in the mud, and we weren't accomplishing the work that our team needed to do. So the first thing when I think about shifting roles and responsibilities of the team was making sure that our meeting format served what we were trying to accomplish. We sat down as a team, we thought about that vision, we thought about what we wanted to have happen, and we shifted our format. We wanted to make sure that we really had shared leadership, we became a collaborative team, and there was a nice balance between, yes, having the doing, but also having those discussions about data and all the different things that need to happen in the school. We have bi-weekly meetings. We're extremely lucky to be able to do that. And our first meeting in the month is usually administrative, where we do talk those data discussions. And sometimes that's a little more heavily facilitated type of meeting. But then the second meeting in the month is very flexible. That's kind of our work time. We divide into subcommittees based on the different work that we need to do, whether it is, because like I said, we're still doing a lot of the doing, whether it is implementing some sort of SEL lesson or doing the assembly committee. We can make that happen while some other quality work is going on. My teachers' buy-in on my team has really increased immensely since we've shifted to the structure, because now it's not my PBIS team, it's our team. So this is the point in time that I want to shift kind of my talking points to talking about the logistics of my team, and then kind of going into the idea of how our team has used that team train support model to work through the practices we do in our school district, or in our school. So I'm going to kind of overview a case study of how our school implemented our data system called EduClimber. And you know, at first when I started to do this speech, I was going to list all the different successes that we had and everything we did that was great. But after talking to my regional coordinator, Liz Ponto, she said, you know, you got to let them know all the bumps and bruises that you've had along the way, because that's going to be the most impactful for the people who are listening, and hopefully be able to send you a message that maybe you can take and not make those mistakes in your own school. So our little case study starts with us deciding that we needed to integrate the EduClimber system. It started in the school year of 2017 and 18. We knew we had to do it because there was some need. First of all, it is our district-wide data system, and it's something that we were required to implement. But it also was kind of the next logical step in the work we were doing. Our team had covered all of those kind of procedural basics, and we were ready to collect data at a higher level. And honestly, although we had some data resources because our team knew that data could be taken in many different ways, we needed a little bit more formal structure. So we made a goal, which was to train our certified staff to use the data collection system and figure out how it was going to be used in the classroom. And the first step for doing that was that we had to define our practice. So if you look at your handout, the idea of making sure that you know exactly what it is that needs to happen. And we immediately got some district feedback and suggestions. Our school, at the beginning of my time as the internal coach, was kind of slow in its enthusiasm towards PBIS. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't overwhelm our staff, and we wanted to make sure that everything we did was very intentional and thought out. So we defined, one of the suggestions the district representatives had given us was to try doing a pilot with our smaller Tier 1 team before bringing it to the larger school. On your handout, that's one of those type of things where you define your practice before you bring it to your larger staff, and that was transformational for us. So we defined the scope of our pilot as a 3-week pilot with just our Tier 1 team. We said we were going to focus only on the minor disruptions using loud or excessive noise, and we set a threshold of kind of a 3-strike guideline. Not to say we put strikes against students, but the idea that we redirected students 3 times, and then if they persisted beyond that, then we had to put an incident into the system. Well, at that point, we then got to pilot the practice that we were doing. And the first step of the pilot was that our school psychologist was able to give us a training on how to use the system. And she presented the training in the same way that she was going to present it to our larger staff. And it was an amazing experience for all of us. Not only for us as a Tier 1 team to experience what it was like to go through the training and kind of the positive and negative emotions that went along with that, but also we could give her feedback. So when she presented that training to our larger staff, then she was able to refine it. There was one little thing, like she thought of the idea of all of the regular general classroom teachers, but us as specialists, we were able to give her some ideas on how that training needed to apply to everyone. So just little things like that made a huge difference. When we did the pilot, we definitely just made some discoveries through our experiences. We realized we were inexperienced data trackers. We didn't have systems for trying to tackle all those small behaviors. We didn't realize that tracking so much meant that we had to have a lot of stamina, and we didn't really understand what we needed to track. The idea of tallying versus tracking teachable moments when we had to reteach something and so on. We had so many things that came up during our pilot, and we did troubleshoot those at all of our biweekly meetings when our team got together. And we tried to solve all those different problems and different things. And I have to say that for every one problem that came up, it seemed like 5 more popped up after that. And so we decided to extend our pilot another 2 weeks just to make sure we really ironed out everything before we brought it to the larger staff. And as you can see from our slide on the bottom, we revised our pilot to include things that we found were troublesome, like the fact that we shouldn't necessarily be focusing on the negative behavior, but we would need to be thinking about what is that ideal behavior and what are the social emotional skills that go along with it, and so on. Finally, we are at the point after 5 weeks that we were able to bring that pilot to our larger staff, and we enrolled it out. To do that, we did train our teachers. We made sure that we set the training in a computer lab in a contextual setting where a teacher would be if they were going to implement an incident into the system. Our school psychologist led the training. She made sure that she included all those changes that we had given when she presented the first time to us. And we also included an interactive portion of the training where teachers were able to do mock entries. And while they were doing the mock entries, we were able to give them feedback and support while they were doing that. And certainly, by doing all of these steps in our pilot, we anticipated a lot of the questions that came up, but not all of them. And those became kind of an issue for us later on as we unrolled it to the staff. Of course, as all good teams do, we did have data collection after we did our initial training. And our data collection took many forms, but our biggest form was those PLC teams and the grade level teams that all of our representatives from our Tier 1 team were on, and they were able to bring the word in the street kind of data back to us to see how things were doing. And so during our phase 1, I have to say that we tried to address as many of the challenges beforehand as possible. Before we ever started, we intentionally had classroom observation with feedback situations set up with teachers. We modeled. We used two-way feedback. We did check-in emails. I have a whole website of instructional materials for my teachers to access. But we noticed that problems still arose. We lovingly divided these categories of people into 5 areas. We first had our resistors who wanted to know why we had to data track in the first place. We had our worriers and our rule followers. Should I put it in? Should I not put it in? I just don't know. And we had our getter-doners who wanted to track everything, every single thing, whether they dropped their pencil or whatever. They wanted to track it. We had our paper and pencil brigade, who were our teachers, thank you, that wanted to just use paper and pencil. They didn't want to go near a computer. That EduClaimer scared them. Why couldn't we just keep doing it the way we did before? And then we had our silent type, the ones that just didn't say anything at all. And normally we would assume that things were okay. But as we worked through this pilot, we realized that just because they were silent didn't mean that everything was all right. So after much support and the best of intentionality, we took a step back as a team and we realized that the unrolling that we did with our staff wasn't as effective as we wanted it to be. So at that point, we decided to adjust our practice. And when we adjusted our practice, we decided to pilot our phase 2 with just our Tier 1 team as we did our phase 1. And to do that, we completely stepped back and we redefined what we were doing with our unrolling. We tried to make sure that we didn't just do support with our staff, but that when we did our second phase, we wanted to give them professional development. Because if you look on your handout, professional development shouldn't be in lieu of support, which we really had made that mistake in the beginning. So we went into phase 2 with a rewording of what our goal was to kind of make it feel different for our staff and to make them feel good about the work they were doing. We trained them using a professional development approach. And we really tried to make sure that we used differentiation with all the different teachers we had. We tried to paint the purpose, paint the big picture, model examples of data tracking moments following all those different 5 types I identified before. Afterwards, our Tier 1 team did a fidelity check, and we were able to see how effective we were with our practice. Our phase 2 was certainly more effective than our phase 1, and as we talked about it, we wished that we could have just started with phase 2 before we did phase 1. But had we not gone through that whole process of everything we had done, we wouldn't have learned what we needed to change to implement and sustain initiatives like this in the future. So now in 2018-19, last year's school year, we took the information we had gotten through that process, and we decided to take a softer approach to how we were doing our EduClimber. We understood that one of the things we learned that teachers needed to understand the smaller components before the whole. So we really encouraged teachers to do data tracking of any sort, whether it was sticky notes, notes to themselves, whatnot, anything that would help them be experienced data trackers. We created a PLC feedback form that our PLCs use as a communication tool for us, and we review this at each one of our meetings. And we also made some other things. We planned for abandonment, trying to take our supports away slowly, all of that type of thing. I noticed that my time is starting to come down to a close, so I'm just going to skip ahead and talk a little bit about what the impact of this pilot was for us. Basically, what happened for us is that we were able to experience the team train support model. We experienced all the positive things that could happen from following it, but we also fell into some of the pitfalls. And by doing that, we feel like we have a better perspective on how we're going to implement new initiatives into the future, including one of the things that we're going to do this next school year is work with our paras on recess school. And so we're now able to ask some of those important questions like, how are we going to train them? How are we going to make sure they're supported? How are we going to address these things? So I want to thank you for your time and attention listening to me and my story of how my school used our EduClimber initiative and how we've shifted the thinking of all the work that we have done with the Team Train Support model. I do want to leave you with 3 final thoughts. And the first is we really do need to embrace that thinking of how we can shift the role of our team. And it shouldn't be something that's explicit, but something that definitely isn't, or shouldn't be something that is unintentional, but something that's explicitly intentional, something that we don't do purposefully. And whatever you can do, try to take a portion of that team train support model back with you as something that you can work on with your staff. It really will make a big difference. Thank you so much. So here we go. If you have any questions for either of us, this would be the time that you can do so and ask anything that you would like to know. And of our leaders as well. We're also looking on our live stream to see if there's any questions. Oh, very good. Yes, sir. That's a good question. Our school, because it was about 2 years ago when we started this whole thing, and we've only had 1 year of full implementation of using the EduClimber system, we're just at that point where we're starting to get valid data to use for data tracking. And that was one reason why it was so important for us to implement that PLC feedback form, because one of the questions on there was, what do you see as a behavior in your classroom that you would find having an impact if we worked on for our PBIS team.
Thank you so much to both of you. We're going to go ahead and conclude this session, but what we'd like you to do, take some time and to fill out the evaluation for this session that you can find on your conference app. I want to let you know that we really take your evaluation seriously. We look for that feedback as we create next year's 2020 PBIS Leadership Conference. And we are really looking for as close to 100% participation in filling out those evaluations as possible because we do value that feedback so much. We appreciate your time in this space this afternoon, your willingness to listen with your eyes, your ears, and your heart to these school stories. And please reach out to both of these schools and districts, as well as to Liz or myself if you have any questions over any of the content that you heard today, or how we can support you at the Wisconsin RTI Center in moving forward with your implementation. With that, please take a few minutes and fill out that evaluation. And we really, truly hope that you have a great rest of your experience here today, and then a great rest of your conference tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you so much, and we hope to see all of you soon.